Hey everybody, welcome to the next video in this Django React build where we're actually going to build our to-do API. Now we have a to-do model, so we can add and subtract data from our database, but we need to be able to have an API so our React front end can interact with it. So first thing we're going to do is actually set up the API. Okay, so I actually have directions here in my Django reference blog post. So like there's the URL. Okay, this is the deployment part. Let's go to REST framework. Okay, so this is what we're going to do right now. We're going to install the REST framework. Okay. So we're going to do a pip install Django REST framework. That installs that. Let me just double check that that's been installed. So I go pip list. There it is, Django REST framework. And then we're going to want to connect that to our application in our settings.py. So again, in our to-do folder, that's where our settings.py is. We're going to want to add, comma, okay, REST underscore framework. That just makes it usable in our application. Now that's connected, yay, and we can use that through our application. Now here's sort of the process. So basically one of the big things there's a couple things you need. REST framework gives you two sort of cool tools. It gives you a serializer, the ability to create a serializer. That's going to take your Python object data, which isn't really necessarily like, it's not like JavaScript where like JavaScript objects can be easily turned into JSON. They're kind of not in that setup. So you need to serialize them, meaning convert them into JSON data or JSONable data, and that's what the serializer class does. You can do that manually in normal Django, but it's a little bit more work to do so. So using the serializers, it just automatically is going to serialize all your possibilities. The other thing we have is called view sets. So basically, normally what would happen is we'd have to create a whole bunch of different like views or controller functions. So we'd have to create one for like getting all the to-dos, creating a to-do, all this stuff. So there's certain conventions that just always exist. So they have classes called view sets that you just plug in the model and it creates all those sort of standard routes. So we're going to connect the view set. And once we have a view set, we're going to connect that to a router. So a router, when it sees a view set, knows which routes should belong to which. So basically, which conventional routes should belong to which of those functions built into the view set, and then we're going to connect our route to our URLs. Okay, so it's a bit of a more complicated process than a lot of other frameworks, but probably as easy as it's going to get in Django. Okay, so first thing we want to do is in our to-do, we're going to create a new file called serializers.py. I mean, the name of the file doesn't necessarily matter, but serializers.py. Okay, and here we're going to need access to our to-do, so we want to import from API.models import to-do. Then we're going to want to import serializers from, so we're going to say import from REST framework dot serializers, if I remember correctly. And then we want to import, there's different types of serializers. The one we want is called a model serializer, because then what happens is if you just use like a plain serializer, you have to go and specify the serialization of every property of the class. With a model serializer, it's just going to assume that you're going to specify which properties of the class to serialize, and it'll just serialize them based on the model, which is a lot easier. So model serializer. Okay, so then we're going to create a new class. This is going to be our to-do serializer, which is going to inherit from model serializer. Okay, and then now the next step, I gotta take a look. So we already made our model and all that stuff. Here's our serializer deal. And then basically we have to do is define another class called meta inside of it, and this is where we define sort of like what models it connected to and what fields we want to serialize. Okay, so we'll say class meta. Okay, let's just read how they set it up. Model fields. Okay, model equals to do. That's how it knows to serialize the to do model. And fields equals, we want to serialize the ID field and the item field. And that's it. So this thing here has a bunch of functions built in to actually serialize data. So basically, we could manually use it to pull data from our database, then turn it into JSON by passing the serialized data into the serializer. But that's still a bit more work than we'd want to do. So that's why we're going to use a view set. So in our to-do, we're going to head over to, let's see, where am I at? Oh, I created the serializers.py in the wrong place. I want to do the serializers.py in API here. So move, that's where I want. I want in the API folder because that's where my models exist. Just makes more sense that way. Because the idea is you want to have everything that relates to that app in the app folder. So in this folder we have views, and this is where we're going to create our views. So what I want is I'm going to still want the API, the model. So api.models, import to do from REST framework dot this one I'll have to look up. Okay, we need to create a views. Where's the view sets? Okay, I want a particular view set, so I'm going to just do that particular. So view sets, import model view set. Okay, model view set, kind of like the model serializer. Instead of us having to specify each field, this is built to work with a particular model. So it works with the definitions we've already set up in our model instead of us having to redefine everything. Okay, so that's that. Let's see, is there anything else I want to make sure I bring in? We'll come back to all that stuff when we do authentication. And then we just need to bring in our serializer. So from API.serializers, import to do serializer. Okay. Okay, so then here we just create another class, which is going to be our to-do views, which is going to inherit from model view set. Okay, and then just kind of like we did with the serializer, we just have to specify a few things so it knows what to connect to. Okay, so query set's just going to be sort of like what's the default query. Serializer class is like what is the tool it's using to serialize, and then permission class will come back to that. That's just allows us to set permissions. The next video will do authentication, so we'll come back to that. But we'll do query set equals to do dot objects dot all, just means get all the to dos, and then we'll do serializer equals to do serializer. Cool. And now this view set's been created. This view set exists. Okay, so that's the next step. So again, basically we had a model. The model gets serialized by the serializer. We send the serializer over to views, and then we create a view set, and then that view set's going to end up in URLs. Okay, and then here in URLs, there's a couple things we're going to want to import. From URLs, we're also going to want to import include. So we're going to want to include as well. You'll see why in a moment. But then also from REST framework, we're going to need routers. REST framework dot routers import, and I forget which is the exact router we need. But let's see here. Okay, so we're just going to use default router. So I will just do that. Import default router. Okay, and then we're going to create a router, which just equals the result of default router. Okay, and then we can just register our view sets with that router. So the router.register, and we want to register our to-do view sets with to-do. And I think I don't need to put a slash in there or anything. Yep. To-do. Okay, I'll just put the R in there because that's what I have in there. To do, and then we just say, hey, we want to connect this to the to-do view set, which you have to import. So from API dot views import to-do views. And essentially what this does is that it creates, this router ends up creating a array of paths and connections to the to-do views functions, because the to-do views is generating a controller function for each thing. Let me see down here. Okay, for each thing, and then that should, we just need to connect that in here with include, and then it should just be include router dot URLs, because basically it's generating this array called URLs, and then this includes that array of URLs. So we should be good to go now. So let's try it out. So in that case, I should be able to do manage.py, and it's going to be now run server. Oops, let's see here. What's it complaining about? Exception and thread. So take a look at my example here. Oh, I see they did a little bit. Oh, okay. My bad, I did that slightly off. It should still be path. And then be router. And then in here we do include router.urls. There we go. Okay, so now the thing is running. So now I should be able to go to localhost 8000 / to-do. To-do views should either include a serializer class attribute. Oops, was that supposed to be serializer class? My bad. Let's go back to my views. Just go back to my thing here. And let's go back to where we set this up. Yep, serializer class. My bad. Serializer class. Okay, and there we go. And then now let's try that again. And there we go. So you can see eat lunch. So we have an API and we can technically now do full CRUD. The thing we want next is kind of like, how do we do authentication on this? So that way you have to be logged in to access this data. You have to have like a token. So we'll explore that in the next video, but you've now created an API with Django REST Framework. There's a lot more you can do with Django REST Framework, so definitely read the documentation. It's a pretty cool little tool with a lot of moving parts, but that's the basic gist. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great day and enjoy.